Hey everyone, welcome to Tim's channel. If you are a gamer, you've definitely seen Easter eggs hidden all over games and movies. But have you ever wondered where the very first Easter eggs came from? Surprisingly, it began with a classic game called Adventure, released in 1980, also known as the world's first action-adventure game. Alright, let's jump right into it.
In terms of gameplay, Adventure can be said to have made revolutionary innovations. It broke away from the then dominant single-screen, linear progression of games, instead designed a continuous open-world map, connecting multiple rooms and piecing together the map, create a coherent world exploration experience, which formed the prototype of the open-world games. In games, players need to find items such as keys, swords, and magnets to help them solve the puzzle, advance the games, and unlock new rooms. Adventure creates the classic game design logic, finding items to open doors. The game features 4 enemies, 3 dragons and 1 bat. They are all controlled by AI and move constantly on the map. Dragons will attack and eat players, while bats will steal items carried by players. Even if the players enter another room, the pursuit doesn't stop. These monsters will also enter the room to continue chasing the players. This also introduced uncertainty into the open world map, creating a game experience where these rooms are connected world, increasing the game complexity and replay value.
Released in 1980 by Atari, Adventure emerged during the transition from arcade video game to home console systems. Before 1977, arcade was once a rage in the video game market, and most games relying on arcades or early experimental systems such as Magnavox and Odyssey. However, the short lifespan and high development costs of such systems pushed Atari to seek a more feasible business and march to the console market. As the precursor to the Atari 2600, the Atari Video Computer System, called VCS, released in 1977, carried several games ported from arcades under Warner's investment. With the later release of 2600, Atari soon dominated the North American console market by 1982, raising the curtain for competition with Mattel and ColecoVision. As a pioneer of graphical action-adventure games, Adventure inherited elements from the PDP-10 text adventure created by Crowther and Woods in 1976. It transformed textual descriptions into graphical representation and has significant influence on subsequent video games. Adventure used the TIA playfield graphics to create boundaries and define rooms. This method of dividing the game world into screen-set segments later became the standard for action-adventure series such as The Legend of Zelda, Ultima, and Tomb Raider. Although Adventure displayed better graphical and colorful capacities, hardware constraints of the era forced designers to maximize limited resources and innovate within strict limitations. The restricted visibilities and multi-mazes design in some levels create a sense of lost direction and make it hard for players to perceive the whole virtual world. This design is also regarded as an early form of the fog of war and later used in military and strategy games.
Playing Adventure demonstrated that the production of video games has always been the force of power, labor, and cultural meaning, which still characterize the modern international market. To begin with, the authorship fight of Warren Robinett reveals the impossibility of workers to identify themselves in early game studios. Atari had banned credit on developers and treated games not as works of creativity but as products. This work of labor behind the scenes is what researchers would call structural power in techno production, where corporate organization decides which workforce will be seen. Viewed in this perspective, a venture is an explanation of why modern credit and credit wars, outsourcing, and the crunch culture are a continuation of a long history of labor precarity within the game-making industry. The first Easter egg, a hidden message by Robinhood to the history of game, is also a revelation of how these power structures were opposed by the developers. Robinhood turned a technical stunt into microwave system by subversively adding his name. This emphasizes the case of twine creators that Harvey discussed, who are also technologically subverting in order to articulate hegemonic challenges in game making. Games, therefore, are not neutral technologies, but a place in which marginal creators use code as a political voice. This tradition is carried on to today in Easter eggs, mods, and experimental indie tools. The issue of technology in adventure also shows the way in which culture is created by infrastructure. The 128 bytes of RAM of the Atari 2600 compelled Robinhood to create a space plus objects plus pathway style of storytelling that created mechanics-based item retrieval, which he would later make the backbone of the action-adventure form. Game systems and infrastructures created cultures and economies that extend well past the screen, which is a point put forward by Bullock and Lemire. The study of the adventure reveals that games are not merely an invention, rather they are determined by the limitation of hardware, platform politics, and industrial interest. Lastly, adventure is the genesis of participatory culture. The Easter egg demanded the players to be explorers, puzzle solvers, and co-producers of meaning. This reflects the manner in which Kosovo defines as how the interpretation of the players, transnational play, and the practices of the fans create new cultural identities and communities. Even the open world form promoted exploration and mastery forms that presupposed speed running, walkthrough culture, and modern forms of fan labor. Such practices denote entanglement of design and commercial system as Evans defines it, which define movement of players in the virtual world, their imagination, and consumption of digital worlds. All these observations demonstrate that culture and production are indivisible. Adventure also explains that games are not solely produced by companies, and they are not also understood by players, but also a result of negotiation of labor, technology, and cultural participation. The playing and studying of this game today can allow us to view as a continuation of history, the modern game culture of credit controversy, modding, indie pushback, international fan subs, and the platform economy as a contest over who is the creator of meaning in online worlds.
Let me wrap our video by stepping back and looking at adventure not just a single game, but as a turning point in how we understand video games as a medium. First, in terms of design, adventure fundamentally reshaped expectations for what a video game could be. Early home console games were dominated by short, act-style challenges like faster action, simple rules, and score chasing. But adventure replaced that model with a world defined by spatial continuity, exploration, and persistent goals. Instead of reacting off moments, players were navigating a system. It introduced items based on progression, interconnected spaces, and unpredictable AI behavior. These ideas later became the backbone of action-adventure games and eventually modern open-world design. Second, we can't separate the game's creativity breakthroughs from its individual context. The hidden Easter egg, Robin's Secret credit screen, wasn't just a fun surprise. It was a statement about authorship and labor. Atari's policy to erase developer identities reflect a corporate structure that treated creative labor as invisible. Robin's act of resistance signals an early moment of tension between individual creators and the companies who controlled their work, and this tension continues today. Visible in debates about crunch culture, unionization, credit disputes, and who gets recognized for game success. Together, these elements reveal that adventure is not just simply a milestone in a game history. In this sense, adventure is not just a part of game history, it's part of a history of the digital media. It reveals how technological limits, corporate structures, and cultural fantasies came together to shape the grammar of interactive world that we still rely on today. So, even though adventure may appear visually simple, its influence runs surprisingly deep across design, across labor politics, and across the cultural foundations of game. Studying adventure ultimately means studying the origins of modern digital world we now take for granted.